Hi everyone, my name is Yana and I'm a Google Ads specialist. I specialize in bringing targeted audiences to businesses with the exact parameters they need, and I help scale sales in different countries around the world, mainly using AI-driven Google Ads campaigns. So in today's video, I'm going to show you a case study from one of my clients. Our market is Germany. The business is in sales, specifically an online store. The company makes its own wooden products for children, generally speaking. I won't specify exactly what these products are. There are a lot of different ones. These are toys, furniture, and tete-a-tete. I won't go into more detail so as not to, let's say, give you too much information about the project. Well, for confidentiality reasons, because some things are your personal information, your advantages, your unique features. And I don't think it's worth making such things public, even though some people might want to take a closer look at this case. If, maybe, I could do that, or if it had been approved. Yes, for example, in an experimental mode, then, most likely, it would have had some significance. So, what's interesting about this project? First, I'm making this case for those guys, those very specific people who really like to dig into the details. They told me, actually complained, that I was filming these foreign cases during Black Friday sales, right before the Christmas holidays, and that, basically, most likely, after that we don't have any sales at all. And all these cases, basically, are just nonsense, and it's more likely the result of a season, so to speak, rather than anything being done in the advertising account. So I decided to show a different time period. Here, I took the period from December 29th to February 1st. Here you go. Specifically, to show both the post-holiday period and, for example, here is February 1st. Well, to be able to explain the reasons, nuances, and other details more accurately. So, using this as an example, I'll show you everything now, plus, I'll also talk about the specifics of this project. Here, well, let's take a look at some things now. I won't be pulling up the cost per conversion, because not all conversions here actually count as conversions. So you'll be able to compare the approximate cost per conversion for yourself at the campaign level. Here's the period, just so you know. I only excluded. Let me set it to campaign name. Just exclude campaign name. Does not contain. And these things here. This is to exclude search, since we didn't support search in this project, so it shouldn't be counted. It's basically branded. So, basically, this is the kind of analytics we see. Yes, of course, the profitability here is a bit lower. There were some pretty good periods here, and just to make it easier for you, here's the number of conversions. There are even 11 and 12, some with 7, on average it's 7 or 6. Well, here in this period we had about 4 or 5. As you can see, we tried to generate traffic here constantly, but anyway, let's get into the details. Why did I decide to focus on this period? Also, I want to reassure some folks who really love to ask questions. Like, you're just showing the sales period. That's not really fair, is it? It's your case. Plus, I want to talk about the nuances of possible support during the post-holiday periods, right? In the post-holiday periods, when basically, people have already seen that your main discounts are over, right? The main holidays and occasions for gifts and so on aren't really active anymore either. Yeah, I'm not counting February 14th here. Well, for example, if someone wants to give a gift for February 14th, right? So here I'm talking about a period that you'll actually see for yourselves. You also won't be able to see the ad campaign settings. And I'll tell you a bit about some technical nuances. These are the challenges present in these projects, and why, for example, sometimes it's not possible to scale a project even with seemingly obvious structures, or the difficulties you might encounter. I understand that cases are usually shared to show off, like, look how great I am. I believe this is quite a worthy result for the team, considering all the tests that were conducted, the structural reworking, and the limited budget we were given. Here, we were given a fairly limited daily budget. The client would sometimes increase or decrease our CPC during this period, giving us either a larger or smaller amount, so to speak. Just so you understand some of the nuances, I'll quickly go over them. I won't go into a ton of detail, but just the basics. I also want to point out that I have two columns for conversions, purchases. This was also a kind of test within the conversions. It's a specific test format. We didn't change the overall analytics for all the goals you saw in the account. For purchases specifically, you'll see the actual set of purchases, so to speak. We don't have many ad campaigns. In fact, after this period of sales, clearances, Black Fridays, and so on, we were left with this main set of ad campaigns. These were the ones that generated the majority of the conversions. At different times, the cost per conversion was a bit cheaper or a bit more expensive. And here you can see that the number of conversions and purchases match up exactly. We have this one promotion, which I would call rather strange because there were very few purchases from it. Plus, the way we launched this promotion was more as a support for other campaigns. It was a pretty short promotion, and it wasn't very effective for us. You can see there were only 5 purchases, but basically, we got everything we could out of it. This is a test version from the remaining ad campaigns that were targeted specifically at a certain type of product. Here, the test campaign is even labeled as such, and these are 2 very interesting tests. Unfortunately, during this period, they weren't fully optimized. They spent 75 here, well, almost up to, 100 Czech crowns, but it's a very interesting test. I see potential in it for siphoning off some of the traffic for major advertisers. And, in general, for the situation that developed in Germany in specifically in the second half of 2024, because Germany has become a kind of, not very, convenient market for scaling up. I'll also make case studies about other countries to show the fundamental differences in how Google operates elsewhere. In Germany, we ran into some pretty significant problems, and these issues weren't caused by aggressive competitors. In fact, some of them even dropped out. In the auction statistics, we even found competitors who were running 2, sometimes even 2 different sites, and some of them were dropping out of the auction entirely. These weren't advertisers like eBay, Etsy, or Amazon, for example. No, it wasn't them either. They'll always show up in the auction statistics, but they're not the reason for the significant drop in conversions there. That's what I found, what I discovered, and I found confirmation of this online. Maybe this will also help you adapt to the changes that might be happening specifically in this market. I haven't seen this in Poland. I haven't seen it in the Czech Republic. I didn't see it this aggressively in France, and maybe in France I just didn't notice it, because our client gave us an even smaller budget there. That's possible, I won't hide it, because with smaller budgets the analytics were a bit different there. It's a similar niche, but it's not the exact same project. I also didn't see this in Spain or Italy. Well, as for the UK, I wouldn't say it's one of the easiest projects. Unfortunately, in this niche, I didn't have any projects in the UK this year, with children's furniture or children's toys, so I have nothing to compare it to. I'm specifically comparing it to the children's niche. What makes it so difficult? As you know, Google has now fully switched, according to European legislation requirements, to a completely different cookie policy. If you're familiar with this consent mode, it has a basic version and an extended v2. And I'll say this, it's the worst thing anyone could have come up with for an advertising account. No one has ever done anything this ridiculous before. Basically, they set themselves up. As I understand it, even they themselves couldn't adapt to the changes in advertising campaigns based on this setup. Their AIs couldn't handle it. So, if we're setting things up, let me give you a life hack. I'm telling you this as a tip, but you can share it however you want, or interpret it in your own way. If we set up the entire consent mode exactly as the law requires, then you shouldn't expect your performance max campaigns to deliver anything super impressive. Maybe, by the end of the first half of 2025, they'll learn a bit more, but all that hyped up machine modeling and conversion filling in, where the system supposedly sees all those conversions, in practice, it turned out not to match what they wrote in the documentation. As disappointing as it is for me to say, what I was promised as a specialist simply wasn't delivered in reality. I understand that they need a period of adaptation and retraining of all these AI tools, at our expense, yours and mine. Most likely, they've already come up with a life hack to get around this. But in 2024, they really messed things up for me. This was especially true starting from October 2024. What did this mess up look like? Since Google, all of its advertising tools, which it keeps pushing on us from the screen, are moving to smart strategies, and honestly, only those actually generate any results. Because the conversion tracking was done carelessly, well, that's how I'm going to call it. They didn't do what they claimed they would. Maybe now it's there. At least, I haven't seen it. No matter what the Googler told me, I haven't seen any conversion tracking. As soon as I removed the consent mode settings, my traffic leveled out, I had conversions, everything was working. But as soon as I enabled it, all I got were just impressions. My impressions for any ad campaigns basically dropped to almost zero. And, well, waiting a month for performance to somehow figure itself out, I just didn't have that kind of time, because it was November, the sales and promotion season. So I think that would have been like shooting myself not just in the foot, but in the head with such a long test. And usually, clients don't agree to such tests either. Let's be objective. Who among you would agree to dedicate a website just for testing, just to figure out whether Google is tracking something correctly or not? So, and what did I see? I saw that, as most stores really started actively using this consent mode. Most likely, they experienced the same situation, a drop in traffic almost to zero. No matter what budget you set or what campaign bids you used, especially the smart ones, clicks were there, but we just didn't see any conversions. But conversions don't come from every click, they come from a certain type of traffic. In other words, not all users make purchases in the same way. There's another challenge in this project, which I'll get to in a moment, just to make the case more comprehensive and really cool in terms of describing some tests. I won't go into the details. That's our internal trick, our intellectual property, so to speak. So, what am I getting at with all this? As I understand it, since their reach has decreased, even for these really big advertisers, I'm sure even Amazon was affected by this. Although, well, maybe not. If they're advertising here from their US stores, maybe nothing actually impacted them. It really depends. You'd have to look directly at the ad accounts to confirm. I think their revenue really took a hit and dropped significantly. I believe Google lost a ton of money in Germany. That's just my subjective opinion. It might not match reality. Let's just call it my personal speculation, so no one comes after me about it. Especially, this is just my personal speculation. And do you know how, in general, they tried to make up for their losses? This is also just my own assumption. It might not line up with reality. Think about it however you want, but maybe this will give you a hint, just like it gave me a hint when I didn't even know what to do with my account. He started to make up for it with other price matching services, which most likely, well, I mean a price matching service. Look, in the European Union, you can place ads directly through the Google Shopping price matching service, or you can go through some intermediary service, so to speak. That service, and we set it up with you through Merchant Center advertising. So, nothing, no mechanics, no tools, nothing is different. There are just some separate price comparison services that, you can Google what they are if you want. I won't drag out this whole story. In short, I think he placed his main bet in the search results specifically on them, because most likely they were generating that increase in revenue more actively than classic Google Shopping, even though, well, they just technically lowered the priority in the results. I've never seen auction statistics for price comparison services. So, in all the auction statistics, if I go here to Auction Insights and select, for example, either search or, well, in our case it would be shopping ads. Here, I'm selecting shopping ads. I've never seen them here. So, there are some advertisers who can be really, well, aggressive. How can you generally tell these price comparison services apart? You can take a look. At the bottom, there's a label that says placed by Google, or through some other service, or another service. And if I'm checking the search results, and I hope you're checking your own results regularly, because if you're not, you're missing out on a lot. And when I was checking my own search results, I saw some advertisers that I hadn't seen in the auction statistics, but for certain queries that were important for sales, which I could even find in the insight statistics, I noticed that they weren't there. I have a hypothesis that I won't see price comparison services here at all, but if I actually can see them here, please correct me if I'm wrong, especially if anyone else digs into this analytics as much as I do. Because I haven't worked with price comparison services myself. I only work with Google Shopping. So, of course, my knowledge in this context might be limited. I haven't seen these advertisers here. I've seen these guys in Google Shopping and at the same time, in the price comparison service. By the way, this is one of the life hacks for doubling your site's exposure without creating additional websites. In the European Union, you can advertise your site directly and also promote your site through these price comparison services. There are tons of them, so you can choose the one you like. What are their advantages? They claim that they offer a 20% discount on the cost per click. Well, I mean, it's probably Google that gives them that discount. So most likely, these price comparison services make money from the fact that Google gives them certain perks or incentives based on their turnover. Basically, it's something very similar to how Tasta and Rozetta operated during Black Friday and the December sales, for those Ukrainians who remember. Well, I'm not going to get into that here. There are some nuances about how they fought. Really hard for search rankings, Casta, Shafa, and Rozetta, and how they were even willing to take heavy losses just to make sales. Even those who didn't advertise at all were doing pretty well through these services. Something similar could happen here. Google noticed that in its own ad campaigns, when I search, I usually see a mixed assortment of product listings, both on mobile and on desktop devices. And it turned out like this. I ended up in a situation where, let's say, I'm searching on Google. For example, I check search results from different countries, and I see a mixed variety of results. Sometimes it's half and half, a bit of both, for example. But in Germany, at a certain point, I don't check the search results regularly, right? I don't take screenshots all the time, because just imagine how many screenshots that would be if you did it twice a day, or 6 or 7 times a week, just constantly taking these screenshots. But most likely, I'll even have to deal with that kind of bureaucracy. So, basically, while checking these search results, at some point I notice that the listings marked posted via Google Shopping are just getting fewer and fewer. And then, at a certain point, there are suddenly way more price comparison services showing up. And so, no matter what I do in my experiments with ad campaigns, whether I play around with different bid options or no bids, or the structure, or with queries, or with my own feed, I see a completely opposite situation. I can look at my auction statistics, and in search for the queries I Google, it more or less matches up. And in the product listings, yes, I see some of these competitors. I hope you're keeping an eye on your auction statistics and checking whether they match reality or not, so you know that performance might be spending money on the wrong traffic. I keep track of that. And at some point, I notice, at a certain moment, that there just isn't any Google listing, no matter which incognito option or device I use. Even when I click on the search results, using those classic methods to get different results, whether it's paid listings from other sites or the usual SEO results, normally, there's even more advertising when you're in incognito mode. Each time, I just see less and less in the search results, just on Google, even though, basically, whether or not. I'm even seeing fewer of these competitors in the results. I've actually done a whole range of work here, for example, to create more overlap with this competitor and so on. So, I'm doing my job there, but it's just that Google itself is reducing the amount of its own native search results, and instead is pushing more price comparison services. And that's super important. Why is it super important? And I'll show you right now. For example, analytics here doesn't track all events. There are a few different options. Well, this is Shopify, so we have these kinds of nuances. Let me also take, for example, the same period, let's say the 29th. And what do we have here? The first day. Apply. And what can you see here? It looks like we have a really nice picture here. We have 238 days to conversion and 254 interactions. Well, I think that's a pretty good result. right? But there's also 249. There are 5 days, 4 days, 10 days to conversion. Someone took 10 days to convert during this period. There are 23 days. So they clicked on my client's branded search 8 times, then once on organic, and then 6 more times on regular search. So in this case, there wasn't even any of my performance or product ads involved. It took 23 days to reach conversion. Because the sequence is so stretched out, which is actually normal for the post-holiday period, this is okay. So, in other words, we consider this normal. But if you don't show the right ad at the right time, that conversion could end up belonging to someone else, not me. And we also need to look at SEO. Maybe it's that same PMAX. We can check by campaign. For example, where did we have that? Here they are. Here it's 19, 23 days. Yeah, this is PMAX. There was 8, then organic, and then PMAX again. So that was a PMAX search. 23 days. Oh man. So look, these are the realities we have to work with. But when Google itself releases these chains for us, it's done the same thing with other advertisers too. I mean, I know a guy who even tried launching several websites. Well, I'm not going to show all of them. What's the point, right? That's something your specialist should be digging into, or you should be digging into yourself. I can see that. Honestly, I'm not fully capturing this traffic. So I take my target queries, which were already converting for me anyway. Over a long period, I've gathered analytics on which queries convert better and faster, and which ones are slower, basically, where the conversion rate is higher and where it's lower. And when I see such unexplained drops, I mean, even after discussing it with the client, we agreed to increase the cost per conversion. Let's make it higher, significantly higher. And still, in reality, it turned out that I didn't even get the conversions I expected. My number of conversions is already inconsistent here because the client receives them in the admin panel and he doesn't have any other active traffic sources. Well, there's organic, but when it comes to Shopify, you can't really talk about organic traffic being significant. Did he run any targeted ads? You can actually check here to see if there are any targeted ads running. Well, for example, the default channel grouping. Here we have direct, and here's paid social. And there was organic social too, right? It was here, for example. Yes, but specifically organic social. This part, nothing here will be blurred. You can see all of this, except for us in the campaign when we were switching. Well, here's organic social, here, and let's say even if this part is blurred, I search for organic social, you see, it's highlighted directly, and there isn't that much of it. Or just social, for example, CPC, like paid. CPC, there isn't that much of it either. So basically, all the conversions I get are generated by my CPC traffic source. Well, that's just the reality these days. And even so, the number of conversions still doesn't add up. That is, there are conversions that come in much later, and Google just can't assign the correct source. There are also conversions that Google simply doesn't track, especially when it comes to the Shopify payment system. That's just how Shopify designed their system. It's basically meant to let you quickly drive traffic and get sales, but it won't even report conversions correctly to ad platforms. The only thing they wrote to me was, "We are working on this." That's it. So, that's the reality I'm living in. Look, this is just one of the nuances I've described here. And even with this, well, did the team handle it super successfully? I think we could have done even better. But when you see sudden spikes in conversions against the backdrop of traffic, and then there's a drop, a dip, it's because there's still user behavior analytics. It's impossible to break that in a single second. You either gather the maximum number of users and then try to catch up with them, or you try to position yourself at just the right moment. But if this attribution model gets scattered even through price comparison services, I think that's a setup. It makes like advertising effectiveness look really low. Okay, that's the first nuance. These are some interesting twists you might notice, find in your own case, or maybe not. I'm sharing this specifically in the context of this topic. But in another context, it could be completely different, because overall, it seems to me that Germany, in this case, at the end of this half year, this October, December, and January 2025, they still didn't quite reach what could have been achieved. Well, I see that there is demand, but with different mechanisms. You're still not quite getting there. Of course, you could say something about the conversion rate, inadequacy, or the difficulty of getting that analytics, and so on, but that's not the real reason. The second important nuance, which is specific to this niche and which you might also encounter, is that certain product groups don't sell themselves. This is already determined by the specifics of how customers choose products. How did we figure this out? How can you figure this out in your own case? Well, first of all, you have really great reports that show the mechanics of user behavior. Second, install a service like Microsoft Clarity on your website. It's free, or the paid version of Hotjar, or any similar tool you like, it doesn't matter. They have the ability, using a client identifier, which unfortunately is different from the one in analytics, to view, over the course of a month or several months, basically all the behavior of a single user. Mobile, PC, tablets, you can see where they were, which sources they came from, even which campaign they entered through. Moreover, you can watch a recording of the session. You can see what the user was looking at there. Well, of course, this will work if you somehow bypass consent mode, theoretically, but you'd have to figure out how to get around it, because, unfortunately, there are laws, right? But you can, come up with something for yourself. So, you would see, for example, that a user might come in through one query, go to the website, browse the catalog, add something, and then proceed to begin checkout. And by the way, if I now add all conversions, here, conversion action, and we just look at the number of begin checkouts, I'll show you right now. I have begin checkout from GA4, right? And here's begin checkout, just from Google Ads, which recorded everything according to the last click attribution model, 718. And this campaign counted 105. Look, one conversion counted as 149 conversions. Another app purchase counted as 155. Well, so, what can I say? In Shopify, of course, just so you understand, this purchase event, the purchase event itself, is implemented through Google Tag Manager based on the data layer. And this data layer is built by analytics, which also doesn't match up. Specifically, it shows 154, and this purchase is set up through a customer event. Well, work with it however you want. And this is considering that at different times, purchases through GTM had very different conversion rates. Anyway, it's not that important. So, I have 718 begin checkouts, and when you just look at it, well, just in Google Analytics, no matter how they position it as a great service for analyzing what's happening on your site, with the basic set of tools available, it's actually really hard to analyze, and of course, it's much more convenient to review things visually. And you look, they clicked begin checkout, they proceeded, plus these begin checkouts, they actually start. For example, if someone clicks Apple Pay or PayPal right from the product page or Shopify payments, even after going from the cart. So, begin checkout can start, even on the product page itself, when a new window just pops up. If you've ever paid through Shopify payments, for example, try to find some foreign site, find one on Shopify, click it, and you'll see that the window opens right away, even without redirecting you to those add payment info or shipping info pages. This is how it goes. This is classic for Shopify, but 718. Well, okay, let's say there's a repeat rate factor there, right? Still, I had 150 add payment info events, even though there were 155 purchases. That's just the reality of working with Shopify, but I still like it. It's flexible, it's convenient. If you can't set it up one way, you can do it differently, unlike with some code. That sometimes only works because of the programmers. So there's a big begin checkout block where people might just start, then go back, get distracted from the checkout process. Maybe the total amount puts them off. Maybe it's the shipping cost. There are a ton of different factors that can affect this. Well, I mean, to find out exactly why people are dropping off, you'd really need to do a survey, right? Like, when people close the site, could you please tell us why you're leaving our site? There can be all sorts of reasons for that. Plus, it's very common that when you add a product of a certain price range to an ad campaign, people browse the catalog and end up buying something much cheaper. By the way, we actually had a situation like that with a client in February, where he said, our average order value has dropped a lot. It's just that, based on the behavioral analytics we gathered, people started ordering slightly cheaper products more often, even though they were still clicking on the more expensive ones. So, you can influence this too. You can train the AI to generate higher value orders, but that takes time. But just so you understand, that's the kind of nuance and context we're dealing with. Not all conversions are tracked, and there are a lot of nuances in user behavior itself. What else is this related to? It's because people, very often, the main problem in this project was finding the right combination of products. What does the right combination of products mean? There are products that help each other sell. And there are products that, when you advertise them together, just end up with negative results. By the way, this is also why sometimes the cost per conversion is high in different types of ad campaigns. This factor is present as well. So, just so you understand the overall context, there's also a nuance here. In choosing the right structure, there are groups of products that work really well together, and some that don't. Moreover, there are situations, this happened in previous periods, when you remove a group of products from a certain campaign, the main one that works for combo products, and then a separate group of products starts converting. As soon as you start adjusting some bids to increase profitability, that campaign immediately tanks. How do you deal with all of this? You need to go into the report editors, build all these reports on cross-sells. These include advertised products, sold products, and also cross-sold items. So you really have to sit down and analyze all of this. And this is where you can sit and dig into everything. For example, this product was advertised but didn't get purchased, say, 10 times. Do we have anything like that handy so you can find it right away? This is already cleaned up analytics, so to speak. And look, by the way, this product, this item ID, see, it was even sold here, 4 pieces, and the entry was actually initiated. The click ID was this one. So if we transfer it here, this is how you can understand how these cross-sells work. For example, here's an example. Someone clicked here, but a completely different product was sold, so the IDs don't match. At the same time, if you pay attention, there's actually no conversion ID here. So these are the same Shopify products, where the numbers started showing up, the classic Shopify scenario. For example, this product, click ID sold, itself 10 times for 31,000 crowns. And there's also a click ID for the same one, but a completely different product was sold. And in this way, we earned, well, how much? 21,000 plus 20. Almost 40,000 Czech crowns. This, basically, is also another one of the challenges you face in these kinds of niches, because launching a separate product doesn't always lead to sales. Unfortunately, a lot still depends on the advertising. Budgets. What sizes do you offer? Ideally, when your profitability drops, and you look at the product level and see that, basically, the expenses are spread out, there isn't one thing that's eaten up all the costs, then you also notice that profitability is going down. In that case, you shouldn't cut the budget, but rather increase the advertising budget. So there are things like that, sometimes not so obvious, that you need to do, and we basically figure all this out through testing. For example, here we tried to push through with the same budget, and you can see how well it performed. Here we rolled back to the previous budgets because, for instance, on Monday it wasn't delivering results. Although, if you look, for example, at the report editor, let's take this report, I'll just rework it. For example, what do we have here? Day, week, where, oh, the week, you can see. For instance, here it's high to low. Actually, oh no, wait, oh, low to high, right, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you can see here that Monday isn't really lacking or anything. Yeah, these are all the conversions. Basically, I'm not going to argue, but it's definitely not super lacking. Here it's actually the opposite. Sunday is fine. So there are situations where, even with things you've tested 100,000 times, the results can still be unpredictable. What's the reason for that? Of course, it's because of the client avatar we've defined. During post-auction periods, it's always much more difficult. Why is this complexity caused? Because the AI is building a client avatar, well, I'm really oversimplifying here, but that avatar is usually based on metrics that work well. And if we enter a new period, right, which comes after promotions, the user's behavior can change drastically. Because during the promotion period, people are rushing to order discounts, leftovers, whatever's left, they're hurrying to get things before a certain date. So, the conversion process is faster there, or on the contrary, we might even attract more of these users. For example, if we take the period, let's say Black Friday, for instance, the 17th period. So, for example, let's take these 3 weeks. 187, 230. It stayed the same as it was, so the number of days spread out is still there, but it's not as dominant anymore. Or, for example, from December 1st to the 26th, right, when we have really high conversions. Well, here I took a slightly larger period. Let's take the 50, well, for this project, after the 21st there really aren't any sales. For the 2nd of November, it probably makes sense to take these first weeks. Something like that. Oh, that's January, let's take December. This way will be correct. Here's where the main share of sales is, and then, as you can see, it's already a bit less, and here, there are fewer interactions. I mean, there are those outlier cases that stand out in the analytics, but overall, they don't dominate the total number. These are the days until conversion. These are basically the challenges we have to deal with. How do you handle these challenges? First, you need to know for sure. To test, to have time to test which combination of products works together. I know, it's super difficult. It only works in these kinds of test batches. How should I put it? The overlap of certain products, basically. Only with experience, only through testing will you understand which products can help each other and which ones just get in the way. Well, it might seem like it's all the same, the audiences are the same, but they can actually interfere with each other. Next, keep this in mind. Constantly Google your own search results. This auction statistics feature that Google wants to get rid of, supposedly because no one uses it, is actually the best way to track whether Google is wasting your money or not. I understand that it comes with a delay. How much you overlap with competitors, how the statistics in general for the queries you pull from performance, and when you Google them, match up with this auction statistics. Because, in reality, the main enemy in these advertising accounts is actually Google itself, not some competitor here. Because the client even had a hypothesis that there was one of these competitors who might be taking a big chunk of our search results. Why aren't we catching up to conversions during certain periods? But no. It's actually sitting right here in this traffic. Yes, I won't hide the fact that there could be a nuance here, that we only captured part of the traffic, because, basically, all the auction statistics are based on a limited number of search queries. That's the reality. So, in other words, auction statistics are misleading. The question is, how can you interpret this correctly? But because of the limited daily budget, because we had a test for a limited daily budget, still, well, how to say? We tried to focus on those queries that would convert. Exactly those queries at those bids. So we were constantly pulling and breaking down with scripts what kind of traffic we would get. Of course, even through the Google API, not every batch of queries can help you extract everything you need. We even tested regular shopping campaigns at different times, though I don't remember if we actually tested regular shopping campaigns during this particular period. No, probably not. It seems there weren't any regular shopping campaigns. No, there weren't. They had all been tested in previous periods, during promotional campaigns. And in regular shopping campaigns, it's more convenient to track auction statistics. They're more reliable, although there is still a section with hidden queries. Still, try to track everything as accurately as possible. We were betting on the idea that, just in case, if something is working, keep it running, because, honestly, sometimes it just eats at you. It really gets to you. And in what way? Like, you see, even Performance Max doesn't want to pull out a separate category. That's just how Google's interface has been lately. Still, there's that moment when you know something works, and you're trying to bet on it, and your gut, your intuition tells you, let's run a few more tests here, And as soon as that category drops, because you're actually pulling a bit of the budget from here, it's hard to resist the urge to put everything back the way it was. Maybe in situations like this, some tests aren't fully completed because working with an ad account is a constant process of testing different targeting options. Are these really the most proper tests? Yes, because all the tests of traffic options, they correspond to the trending nature of the queries. That is, as always, we try to choose a query that doesn't have any major seasonal fluctuations. So the main goal is to bring, basically, all the account analytics to queries that have the least seasonal fluctuations. Specifically in this niche, because it really isn't affected by seasonality. There are peaks, like during sales and so on. But kids are born all the time, and kids are always growing. So it's a never-ending story. Even with the declining trend in birth rates, Europe still isn't seeing a decrease in this audience volume. Next. There was something I wanted to say. Maybe there's some under-testing in certain narrow. Well, let's put it this way. This test hasn't been fully completed here, so I won't reveal what kind of test it is. It only just started being advertised in performance campaigns. In December, it was launched in classic shopping campaigns. And I'll say this is something I really pushed hard to the client, but it needed time to optimize. Back then, we were really rushing things. We tried to activate the budget only within certain limits. This test is here, even in December. It probably even ran back in November. That was during the sales period, when we were trying to boost the account against the backdrop of our main content. Here we can see it. This test right here. It was, well, really great. These are all purchases. I understand that this is conversion, but you can see that there's all conversion here. These were really great sales. They were super cheap. The only downside was that at the time we were analyzing, some ad campaigns showed 0 conversions, because Google uploads these conversions with a delay. Sometimes it happens that a person completes a conversion, I don't know, maybe after 6, 7, or even 13 days, and Google can attribute that conversion to the correct click. So, we tried to rerun this test, but since we had a limited budget, we had to focus only on what could actually work. It was eating at us. It was really eating at us. If we go down that narrow path, it'll take time, and we might end up wasting time. It's better to spend the budget on all these other things. But these tests, these micro-tests in narrow segmentation, that's what makes it possible. Damn, I can't tell you about it. This is, in fact, our achievements, all our tests, all the intellectual property of the specialists, or myself when we come up with a strategy. I told the client about this. A brilliant test is what allowed us to squeeze out those sales in a targeted way, despite those price-matching services. Because here, it wasn't a competitor that was getting in our way. For example, there are niches where, for instance, the topic just gets completely eaten up. There are niches where, say, Amazon becomes more active during discount periods, and they also monitor the trends. And in those cases, this mechanism works too. In the States, it works just perfectly. And here we decided to try this exact niche within Germany. Well, it was probably an incomplete test. Most likely, my manager didn't push the client enough to continue it. Although, look, this is a purchase. Just so you understand, these are purchases at super low prices. I can even pick them out like this. Here we literally had a test. Well, just so you understand, this test didn't even last a month. It was a very targeted test. The client was scared of this guy. And, well, of course, because there were other companies in the background. And at that point, we weren't seeing any conversions, and here we had already cut the budgets. There was just one conversion here. So, in short, this is the kind of situation that can happen. It was a great test, but it was long and required additional budget. Well, these are just some nuances. So, basically, that's the case. Maybe I'm describing it a bit chaotically, without any preparation or any intention to sell you something. The main point was to show that you can actually get into the post-sale story. You can get into the post-sale story. Where is it? So there. Oh, first, apply. Where is it? Right. The point of this case was to say that you can actually work with the post-sale story. You need to run tests, even if you really want all your tests to immediately bring you super-duper sales. Without testing, we can't grow the account. Not every case is drawn on super cool, trendy, speakers or other things. Here you go, 10 sales, 7 sales a day for a product that can actually sell. Even with super complicated attribution models for these conversions. Anything is possible, really. The only question is whether you're ready. For this work, for these tests, for the time it takes to train your AIs. Because you also need to stabilize them, make them consistent, so they generate a certain type of traffic. Basically, the goal of this case was to show that even during tough post-sale periods, you can often fit very well into the conversion volume. The only question is whether we'll just go along with the client. When they don't see these conversions inside the ad account, they come in after the fact, and then you adjust the account. That's the situation we ended up with. I wasn't keeping an eye on it. We broke the rules, went along with the client, and everything crashed. So that's the situation. There are certain scaling regulations, especially since this project has been with us for more than just a month. So there are things you should do, things you shouldn't do, things you need to consider, and things you don't.